Hello, everybody. So I promised that I would go live as much as I could between now and the AP Lang exam. So it is pretty late on Wednesday night. So this won't be a very long Q&A session, but I would love to answer any questions that you have about the upcoming AP Lang exam. Hi. Hello to everyone on TikTok that's joining. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in the chat. I'm happy to talk about anything AP Lang related because the exam is just a few days away. In fact, the AP Lit exam was earlier today, and I've heard some good things and also some bad things about the digital testing. If you are an AP Lit student, please do not disclose any of the testing info. But basically, what I heard was that some people had a really good experience with the digital test and others had issues. I heard of one school having the fire alarm go off during their test, which actually happened to me when I took an AP test my senior year. But they wouldn't let us leave the room. There was literally smoke billowing out of the cafeteria, and they wouldn't let us leave. So, it could be bad if you have a fire alarm. But I've heard that the test was actually pretty easy. A few different students from different schools that I know kind of just checked in and said, yeah, it went well. It was pretty easy. So hopefully the Lang exam is just as easy. Should I prioritize MCQ or FRQ? So if you're talking about on exam day, they're separate sections. So obviously you want to try hard on both of them. But if you're talking about just like general prep between now and the exam, I would say it's probably a little bit easier to get better at the FRQ if you're studying on your own because there's fewer MCQ released materials. There are some things you can do. There are some practices online, including like SAT stuff. But I would say if you're trying to like improve your score, the FRQs are worth more. And I think it's easier to practice and prepare to study with those between now and the exam. So that's what I would recommend is if you're trying to figure out how to study, and what to prioritize, I would prioritize the FRQs. How do I have a stronger thesis? Okay, good question. So which essay are we talking about? Because there's like tips for both. Let's start with rhetorical analysis. So for rhetorical analysis, to strengthen your thesis, one thing you can do is incorporate rhetorically accurate verbs. So instead of saying like uses logos or uses repetition, we want to say like logically asserts or repeats and then say what they repeat. Don't just say like he repeats because that sounds kind of weird. So stronger verbs can help. Making your sentence, and this goes for like all essays, but making your sentence a complex sentence. So what I mean by that is a simple sentence is just like an independent clause, right? So you want like a dependent clause plus an independent clause. So for instance, for rhetorical analysis, you could say in so-and-so's speech to whomever, comma, and then tell us what they do. So remember, we need choices plus message, argument, or purpose. And that's going to be stronger structure than just saying so-and-so does this. So for rhetorical analysis, a strong thesis is going to have choices in the verb form plus message, argument, or purpose. They might tell you the message, argument, or purpose in the prompt, but you need to go beyond what they say if possible. Now, for argument and synthesis, a lot of my students like to do a counter argument thesis. So they like to do, sorry, I just saw a comment from, I think, one of my students because it says make a personal study guide and there's a smiley face. And so, yeah, I know who you are. Yes, please make your study guide. My students last year told me that I shouldn't use periods. I should use smiley faces when I made comments to them. So you can do a counter argument thesis for synthesis or argument. And basically what that means is like you would start with like while or although and kind of indicate the other side and then assert your position. It's sometimes good to follow that with a therefore sentence just to fully clarify your position. So that might be something to do as well. Got a question over on YouTube. Are there different types of styles for each type of essay? I know for some, like an argument, you need to write a letter. Oh, okay. So I think you mean like for the prompts. Yeah, sometimes in the past, they've done like write a letter to your school board or something. They did that one year. You technically don't actually need to write a letter, though. I wish they would not do that. And I'm glad that they haven't done it recently. So basically, like you're writing essays. Like a couple times they've done like write a letter to so and so, but like no, you're still writing an essay. So yeah, just look at the more recent prompts online, everything from like maybe 2018, maybe 2017 to 2022, and that'll show you kind of like the current style. But yeah, when you don't have to actually like write a letter or anything, you're just writing essays. Is it required to write a rebuttal paragraph or synthesis? No, like you don't have to address the counter argument. So if you do a concession, you should have a refutation. If you do a counterclaim, you should have a rebuttal. They come in pairs, but like you don't actually have to address the counter argument. No. What essays do you need sources in? Synthesis, and you need 3 sources. They provide usually 6 to 8. It's been 6 recently, so I'm assuming that's what they're going to do this year. At least I'm hoping, because 8's kind of a lot. Any tips for MCQ? Yes. One would be if this works for you, read the questions first before reading the passage. This works for some students, but not all, but it can really help you read with a purpose. So if you are like me, I used to like hate the reading passages because I found them really boring and I would get distracted and I would forget what I read. Read the questions first so you know what you're looking for. It can streamline your process. If you are a lot stronger with the writing questions as opposed to the reading questions, then I would definitely start with the writing questions. It's going to be passages 3, 4, and 5. So those are going to say this is a draft at the top. And that can be really helpful because sometimes what happens is when students are better at those questions, but they save them for last, they actually rush. And then they like lose points because they're rushing, but if they had just done those first, they could have gained those points. And so we want to prioritize the questions that we're good at. Each question is worth 1 point for the MCQ. So we don't want to like linger too long on any one particular question. Also use process of elimination. So try to narrow down your choices, answer every question. So even if you're just guessing, it's better than leaving it blank. Read the surrounding sentences. So I know this is like rapid fire tips, but I have an MCQ tips video on my channel that's pretty recent. So if you want like slower, more in-depth tips, definitely check out that video. But basically read the surrounding sentences sometimes, because if they say like lines 5 to 7, sometimes there's a context clue in like line 4 or something. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that goes for writing as well. Sometimes you need the surrounding sentences for writing. Can I use song lyrics as evidence in my argument essay? Technically, yes, you can. I've seen it done before. Just make sure it's like meaningful. What was it? It was the striving for perfection prompt. We saw a lot of, what was that Miley Cyrus Hannah Montana song? Nobody's perfect. A lot of people quoted that. So as long as it's like meaningful, yes. What are some rhetorical devices, to keep on hand? Well, first of all, word choice and tone are in everything. So if all else fails, you've got word choice and tone. They kind of go together because word choice creates tone. Common ones that I see a lot are repetition, possibly anecdote. So like a short story or examples. Trying to think. I have a video on my channel of some of the more common ones. I guess technically allusion is sort of common. I would say that's like a mid-level one. Like it's not super common, but it could be because there's like biblical allusion and like allusions to mythology and stuff. So sometimes that's in there. Also remember that choices are what the writer is doing. So it could be more broad. It could be like flattery or criticism. It could be trying to like prepare the audience for something. It could be like rallying the audience for something. It could be acknowledging something. So there's a lot of verbs that you can use to describe rhetorical choices. But yeah, repetition's pretty common. Anecdote, detail. So usually when we're talking about nonfiction, instead of saying imagery, we say detail. So that's another one, like detail and like descriptive writing is pretty common. Comparison and contrast, those are good ones to know. So yeah. Can you shout out Mr. Gelman? Yes. Hi, Mr. Gelman. When will you be going live again? Most likely tomorrow, because I don't think I have any tutoring sessions tomorrow. So it'll probably be later, maybe not this late because it's where I live, it's 10 p.m. But as soon as my kiddos go to bed tomorrow, I will try to hop on live again. So make sure you're following, that way you get notified. I go live on TikTok and YouTube simultaneously. So I will be going live tomorrow, and then definitely at least once or twice over the weekend. And then Monday night for sure, because the test is Tuesday. How do you recommend to review for a test like this? So here's what my students are doing. One of my students was in the chat earlier, so she was talking about something we did earlier. But so if my students are watching, like, love y'all. Seriously, I have the best students. They are so awesome. But we are doing like a couple different things. We are doing a Q3 database. They already turned it in, but basically you can kind of do it on your own. All you do is just like watch a couple documentaries or listen to TED Talks or just kind of like brush up on current events, just to broaden your knowledge for Q3. Something else that you can do, if you're trying to prepare, is make a game plan. So basically, you want to figure out how much time you intend to spend on each part of the test. So we did it in class today. I have a YouTube video about it. If you type in and you search for Coach Hallwright's game plan, there's a video from last year about it. I also offer workshops on it on OutSchool. If you're new to OutSchool, you get a credit and you could use the credit toward the class, so it's free. And I actually have a workshop coming up, I think 2 workshops coming up Friday. So if you want a chance to have me help you with that and ask additional questions like via Zoom, then definitely check out the information on YouTube. It's in the description. On TikTok, it's in my profile. If you can't find it, just message me. But basically, what you should think about is like, what is my strategy going into the multiple choice? Am I going to start with the reading questions first or the writing questions? What do I need to remember as far as like, am I really good at guessing? Am I not so good at guessing? That kind of thing. And then for the FRQs, you know that you have 2 hours and 15 minutes. So you really need to have a plan for how you're going to spend that time. Now, as I told my students in class today, it's possible that you like might have to change your plan. Maybe one of the prompts is going to be harder than you thought or whatever. But I would say prioritize the essays that you think you're going to do well. Most students start with synthesis just because it's so time consuming, but you don't have to. You can do the essays in any order. So I would ask yourself, what is your strongest essay? Which one do you tend to get the highest scores on? And if they're all kind of equal, then which one do you like the best? Some people like to have a plan and then they might change their plan once they see the prompts, but it's good to have a plan because you want to know not just like how long you intend to write it, but like how long do you need to read the sources? How long do you plan it? Things like that. Because I think sometimes students forget that there's like reading and planning involved in this. And so you want to make sure that you're budgeting your time correctly. Because what you don't want is ideally you don't want to have like 20 minutes left and then you're just starting your third essay. You could do it. You could write a quick essay in 20 minutes, but 20, 30 minutes, but you don't want to have to do that. Thank you for liking and sharing the live. What can I do to prep for the AP Lang exam? So yeah, we were just kind of talking about that. Great question. Basically, just like brush up on your knowledge for Q3. If you're looking for MCQ practice, I recommend SAT questions, specifically the nonfiction for reading and some of the writing and language stuff that has a question stem could be good. I would also say if you haven't written an essay in class recently, or if you have never done like multiple essays all in one sitting, I would encourage you to try that kind of like a mock exam. You can get the past exam questions online. And this weekend, if you have time, you could sit down and like practice your pacing and your timing. And then those essays should have samples online so you could compare your writing to the samples and kind of see how you did. Or if you're interested in tutoring, I have 20-minute sessions where you can sign up and just look at a quick essay with me. We could go over it. I did a few sessions tonight. Same thing. If you're new to OutSchool, you get a credit. The credit gets you the cost of the class, so you don't have to pay anything. So if you're interested in that on YouTube, check out the description. And if you are on TikTok, the info's in my profile. And anyone who signs up and takes a class on OutSchool, if you use my link, then my almost 5-year-old gets to take a class for free too. So it's kind of cool. Do you have a video on how to write a counter argument paragraph? I sort of do. I have a video on concessions and refutations. It's kind of old. I'm going to redo it next year, but I think it might help. It might be what you're looking for, but it's not exactly a counter argument one. That is a really good video topic idea though. In fact, I'm going to write that down because it doesn't help you, but it'll help next year's crew. But yeah, I have a concession and refutation video. That's kind of like what you're asking for. And that it's a couple years old, but it might help you. Is that true? Is what true? Sorry, let me like scroll back through. How do you get 4 points in row B? So basically, to put it in like layman's terms, you have to literally prove all your claims equally with evidence and commentary. So you have to have specific evidence. So for Q3, that's going to be like concrete examples that you've explained well. And then for like synthesis and rhetorical analysis, it's like specific quotes or paraphrase, like you have to refer to the passage. So that's the first thing they look for is, do you have specific evidence? Usually most people do. Usually that's not the issue. Then they look at your commentary. And so if you have like, let's say 2 paragraphs and one is good, meets expectations, does what it needs to, but the other one is like so, like it's close, then that's a 3. If you have both paragraphs that are strong, it's a 4. And if you have 3 paragraphs, it's the same thing. You want to be consistent. So quite literally a 4 is like consistently developed, like very uniform. Extra commentary, basically, among other things. Let's see. Okay, my teacher said that the AP graders are looking for where to give us points in our essays. Okay, I think that might have been the thing this one said. Is that true? Yes, I think what your teacher means is we are told to read supportively. And what this means is like, we're not looking to penalize you. So it's not like you start at a 6 and we just subtract a bunch of points. It's actually like the opposite. Like we try to move you up on the rubric. So some teachers tend to grade very harshly, and like exam readers are more lenient. Some teachers grade leniently and the exam readers are more harsh, but we all calibrate like literally every day when we show up to it. When we open our computers, we have to calibrate. So they give us a bunch of essays to read and we have to score them. And like our scores have to match their scores. And if they, well, it can be off by 1 point. There's certain stipulations. But like if a person fails calibration, which is super rare, but if they do, they have to go through training again. So like the College Board's doing what they can to look out for you. And readers are very consistent. And if we ever get an essay where we're like, I can't read this, or I don't know, we pass it off to our table leader. And so there's like a chain of command. So we're looking to support you and read very supportively. So we're not grading the essays. We are scoring the essays. And the difference in terminology is grading is considered like more harsh. Like we're looking for mistakes and trying to correct things and taking off points. Whereas scoring is just like acknowledging what you've done and rewarding you for what you do well. At least that's how I interpret it. What methods do you recommend for analyzing a rhetorical analysis text? So do you mean like methods of development, or do you just literally mean like how should you do it? Because what I have my students do is what we call a chronological analysis. So basically you want to read the passage and kind of note the choices as you go, and then kind of divide it up when you're done. So beginning, middle, end, or first half, second half. So you figure out, okay, they begin by doing this, and that's your choice. They continue by doing this, and they conclude by doing this. And the reason why that is considered stronger in most cases is because you are following the speaker's line of reasoning, which is their logical order. And then because you've done that, you're following their line of reasoning, then you have a line of reasoning, or at least it'll help your line of reasoning. The opposite of that is what we call device driven. And this is how a lot of essays used to be written, but it's not really the preferred method anymore. And so device driven is when you just kind of like search through the whole document and you're like, oh, I see repetition in a bunch of places. I'm going to write a paragraph about repetition. If you do that, at least keep it in chronological order so that it's not so random, but beginning, middle, end chronological analysis, or like first half, second half, is a better approach. There's a couple of videos on my channel that might help with this. I do have an essay or a video about how to write a rhetorical analysis essay. Find the updated one if you're looking for that, because there's one that's like 5 minutes long and I speak very fast in that video. I don't know why. Sorry. But it's good info and it's super quick, but it is like, I watched it and I was like, this is way too quick. So I redid the video. And it's like from a year or so ago. But I also have a video about how to write a rhetorical analysis paragraph. And I think in that video, some of the tips in there would also help. Let's see. My writing isn't super advanced and many people use advanced vocab words and instructors. Does this affect your score? No, it doesn't, because, it doesn't penalize against you. If students have advanced vocabulary and advanced syntax, like they're able to use colons and dashes and semicolons correctly, and they use like adverbs and adjectives correctly to make their writing more precise, it's possible that they might get the sophistication point. However, if you don't do those things, you just wouldn't get the sophistication point. But that is super rare anyway. It's like 5 to 9% of students. So don't feel like you have to like stress about that. Really focus on your evidence and commentary. If you don't think you have a good writing style, Don't worry about your style at this point. You should be worrying about your content. It is much more important to have specific evidence and commentary. Style is part of sophistication. Okay, let's look at some questions from TikTok. So, what's commentary? Commentary is when you explain the significance of your evidence. So, it's like the why, how, or so what. It's the harder part of the essay because it's like your actual interpretation or analysis. So, we want to have more of that than evidence. All right. Shout out to Dr. Hammy. Um, Looks like we have a couple of people in the chat asking for that. So shout out to Dr. Hammy. Is there an MCQ section? Yes, it's the first section. So basically, when you walk in and you start your test, they'll give you like instructions, but the first section is going to be MCQ. So that's going to be 45 questions in 1 hour. And then you get a 10-minute break. And then you have your FRQ, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes. MCQ tips. I covered some, like probably a good number of those earlier. And I do have a video on my channel that goes in depth. It's kind of like an updated video of MCQ tips. So I would love it if you would look for that video on YouTube and support me there. It's a pretty recent video on my channel. I've done a lot of YouTube shorts just because it's new and YouTube wants us to try it. But if you look for the AP Lang MCQ tips video, that's pretty recent. It has a bunch of tips, like all my best tips in that video. How do you recommend getting better at timing? First of all, cut the fluff on exam day. Do not write a long intro. 2 body paragraphs are fine. So if you typically write 3 and they're all kind of short, I would probably recommend considering doing just 2 body paragraphs and develop them more. You also don't need a conclusion. It's nice to have one, but it's not required. So if you're running out of time, cut the conclusion. And then you technically don't need to address the counter argument either. So if that's going to slow you down and it's not going to help your essay, then don't do that. And then also, some students don't plan their essays. I would say, even though it seems counterintuitive, planning your essay in advance and figuring out, okay, these are my main ideas. This is my thesis. That's going to help you in the long run because it's going to give you a roadmap. And so if you have to speed up your writing, then it'll actually help you. Are you an essay grader? So I am an AP reader in addition to being an AP teacher. I've graded or scored essays for the past 2 years. And I also score like at a local mock exam, but I'm an AP reader. Yes. There are several of us though. Like I don't think there's like 1,000, but there's probably definitely multiple hundreds of us. Let's see. Questions on YouTube. Let's see. What does the sophistication point look like in all 3 essays? Okay, good question. So you can kind of earn it for basically the same ways, but let's start with what I think is the easiest way to earn it in most cases, or the way that we see it earned most frequently, which is vivid or no, that's the least frequent, is vivid and descriptive style. The most frequent is situating the issue in a broader context. So some tips for that for rhetorical analysis would be if it is a historically based passage and you know the history behind it, you can incorporate some of that info perhaps in your intro, maybe your conclusion, maybe your body paragraphs. It really depends on where you want to put it. But if you really examine the rhetorical situation very deeply, beyond the obvious, and do that consistently, it can lead to sophistication. One thing that I have my students do is whenever the prompt says something about message, I have them, if they're going to write a conclusion, I have them ask themselves, how is this message relevant today? And they put that in their conclusion because it's expanding it to a broader context. Does not guarantee that they'll get the sophistication point, but I think it really does help. So that's one way. Vivid and descriptive style is like the least common, but that's going to be using adverbs and adjectives correctly and precisely, incorporating advanced punctuation like colons, semicolons, dashes, making rhetorical choices on your own, possibly. So meaningful repetition that you put in there, or like a meaningful comparison that you put in there. For rhetorical analysis, the other option is analyzing the complexity and tension. And I think some prompts are actually really good for this. Like if you're familiar with the Abigail Adams prompt where she's advising her son, there's a lot of tension there. Mother son tension. She wanted him to go on a trip. He did not want to go. So you could analyze the tension. If you're familiar with the Gandhi and Lord Irwin prompt, then there's tension there because of the relationship. So those are the ways to do it for rhetorical analysis. I do have, I think, a pretty recent video on rhetorical analysis sophistication that I would love it if you would check out. And it's pretty similar for synthesis and argument. A nuanced argument can lead to sophistication. So qualifying it in a meaningful way can really help. I have a question for the timing of the actual test. Are we given the time at once or do we get a certain amount of time and then the next essay? Okay, so what's going to happen on exam day is for MCQ, you're going to get a booklet with the passages and a booklet that's like your answer sheet. And so you have access to all that for the hour. Then you're going to have to like seal them up and put them away. You get your 10-minute break. And then for the FRQs, if you're doing the paper test, at least you get a booklet that has all of your prompts in it at the same time. And then a booklet with like approximately 12 pages, double-sided. That's where you write your essays. So you have access to all of the essays at the same time. So they tell you, you're advised to move on to your next essay and stuff, but you can do the essays in any order. You can spend any length of time. You just have 2 hours and 15 minutes total to write all three. Can you eat during the break? Yes. Yes, you can. In fact, like a lot of schools provide a snack. But if I would check with your teachers, because these are things that you might need on test day if your school doesn't provide it. Number 2, pencils, not mechanical. Blue or black ink pen, choose something that doesn't smudge. I would bring a snack, especially if your school doesn't provide it, because usually the 10 minutes is when you should be using the restroom. Try not to go during the test because I think they have to let you go, but like you don't get the time back. So use your 10-minute break. I might bring like a water bottle or something if you need it. I would have a watch if possible because you can't always see the clock in the testing room. It cannot be a smartwatch though. So it cannot send or receive messages, but a cheap little Walmart watch could work. But yes, you can bring snacks. Are you going to post these review sessions? So do you mean like the TikTok lives? I'm just going to be going live as frequently as possible. I do also record these on YouTube. So if you want to somehow go back and watch it, they're on YouTube as well. And then the night before the exam, I'll be going live on Tim Freitas's channel. He's with the Garden of English. So it'll be 7 p.m. Eastern time. May 8th, we'll be going live for more than an hour, probably answering student questions just like this. I'm going to see if I can, since it's his YouTube channel, I'm going to see if I can record that through TikTok too. Hopefully the audio would work. That way we could be in both platforms at the same time. But I will be going live multiple times between now and the exam. So please make sure you're following and please tell your friends because I would appreciate the opportunity to help as many people as possible. Can you explain a theoretical thesis? Do you mean like an open thesis? Open thesis statements are really hard. Most people do a closed thesis statement and you're not penalized for that in any way, so it's fine. Is grammar graded on the essays? No. I wish they would take that off the bullet points that they put on there because they say something about like grammar and spelling or something. But no, like because it's not fair because some people have dyslexia or other issues where like or they're an English language learner, like some people just don't spell correctly. Like if we can read it, we're fine. So if you make grammatical mistakes, don't worry about it. We look at your content. Can we bring backpacks to the test? It kind of depends on your school's rules. Like some schools make you put it like outside the testing room. You can't have your phones, like you have to put them somewhere and that kind of thing. I'm so nervous for Tuesday. Listen, we got time to prepare. We'll be good. Do you have any specific resources for a Q3 database? Yes, I have the database that I give students. I don't know how I can send it on TikTok. I should put it in my link tree so y'all could have it. If you, I really don't know that it's like that groundbreakingly helpful, but it's basically like a bunch of boxes where it's like you put your evidence, like it gives you a topic and then you put your evidence and some keywords and commentary. So if you want that, like it's not super groundbreaking, but my students last year said it helped. So I gave it to my students this year. If you message me, I can like create a bit.ly or something and I can try to get it for y'all. I just don't want to like make it seem like more amazing than it is. It's just like a chart of things. I did send it out to a lot of different teachers, so they might have used it. Um, what do you think the RA piece will be about? Okay, so here's the thing. They've done a lot of American stuff in the past few years. So I'm waiting for in the next few years for it to be world and not American. I'm also waiting for it not to be a speech. However, they really want something with a clear rhetorical situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two it's like a letter or an article somehow tied to some major event. And then they've also done a lot of contemporary lately, so I'm also waiting for them to do something old. So, and they're not gonna do something that's, like, super famous that a lot of people teach either. It'll be something kind of obscure. But the reason why they do a lot of political stuff, like American politicians and stuff, or, like, public figures that are in politics, is because it's in the public domain, so they don't have to buy copyright. So that's why. So yeah, I could be totally wrong. I hope it is a contemporary American speech by a politician, but if it's like a world letter from like the 1800s, I would not be surprised because they haven't done anything from the like they haven't done a letter super recently. They haven't done anything worldly super recently. Like the last thing they did was the Gandhi letter, and they haven't done anything old super recently. So we'll see. Thanks for the help. You're welcome. And I also don't have any predictions about the Q3 prompt. If y'all have anything, let me know. We should have like a little contest to see who gets it closest. What would world mean? Oh, just like not American. So like literally from anywhere else. Because they've done a lot of American speakers in the past few years. So when I say world, I mean like literally not an American speaker. What are the best tools to use for rhetorical analysis? Um, and are there wrong ways to interpret a text? I mean, yes, technically you can misinterpret a text. It's kind of hard to like teach you not to, other than like we want to ask ourselves, what is the writer doing? And why are they doing it? So like choices and purpose. And there are common devices that you should know. I have a video on my channel about this that I had intended to redo. I'll probably redo it next year. So check out the video. It's like, what choices do I really need to know? And there's like 10 or 12 on there. It's things like comparison, repetition, word choice. Technically, it's worth knowing the appeals. I have a separate video about the appeals. So if you're a type of person who likes to write about logos, ethos, pathos, go watch that video because there's a better way to do it. You also want to use rhetorically accurate verbs like acknowledges, flatters, criticizes, justifies. That can sound better than trying to use some of these like fancy device names. Yes, you can lie. Yeah, you can lie. Because like they don't fact check you. Make sure it's believable. But technically, yeah, we can't fact check you. So it's totally fine. It is what it is. Do you have any last minute tips or tricks for the MCQ? Um, Consider possibly reading the questions first. For some students, that helps because it gives you an idea of what you're looking for. If you are better at the writing MCQ, as long as you're super careful with your bubble sheet, if you're taking the paper test, you might benefit from starting there because you can get hopefully more points. If you find that you typically have to rush through the writing MCQ, the last 3 passages, and that's what you're good at, I would prioritize what you're good at. I think that's the big lesson is prioritize what you're good at. Any tips on understanding tone and diction, especially for older passages? If you're struggling with like older passages, I would ask yourself, what is the topic? Like, what is it about? Because remember, tone is the speaker's attitude toward the subject. So if you are struggling with tone, try to start really simply. What are they talking about? And then do they have a positive or a negative view of it? And how do you know? Because word choice creates tone. So if you at least start there, that'll help. I would also look at their verb choice because a lot of times if you don't understand the passage, you can make sense of it by looking at their verbs. Tips on time management, specifically for the essay portion. Okay, so we want to be as methodical as possible and cut the fluff. So, things you can do. Number one, do not write a long intro. Ideally, a couple sentences plus a thesis. Worst case scenario, just a thesis and move on. If you are worried about it, you could leave a couple spaces and then like write your thesis so you can go back and fill in if you want to. But if you happen to gain time back, two body paragraphs, totally fine. I know a lot of students are told to do three, but if you have three mediocre paragraphs, it's not really helping your score. Whereas if you have two really good paragraphs, it is better, in my opinion. So you want to really develop your paragraphs. And so a lot of students only have time for two, and that's okay. You do not need a conclusion. If you're going to just write a recap of everything you just said, it's probably not worth it. Now, if you know how to write a conclusion that's more sophisticated, that kind of adds like nuanced information and is thought provoking, then absolutely go for it. But if it's just going to recap everything you just said, don't waste time doing that. It's not really needed, if I'm being honest. Also, you do not need a counter argument. So if it's not going to help your essay, it's probably not worth including. So those are some like quick things you can do to kind of save time. It's kind of like really streamline what you're doing and just really think about the rubric, the first 5 points on the rubric, ignore sophistication because most people don't get it. And just really think about how can I earn those points quickly? How many claims should your thesis have? You want to have at least like 2 main ideas essentially. Like your thesis is an overarching claim, but if you're including your main ideas in it, you should have at least 2. I'm having trouble finding things to write about other than tone. What should I focus on? Ask yourself what they're doing because that's what rhetorical choices are. Um, Repetition's pretty common, comparison's really common, possibly anecdotes. But if you don't know, like if you get a passage and you're like, I don't see any rhetorical choices, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what are they doing? Are they flattering their audience? Because that's a choice and you could write about it because you could tell us what words they've said to flatter their audience. Are they acknowledging something? Like, are they acknowledging a tragedy? Are they informing the public? Like, it kind of bleeds into purpose a little bit, but are they justifying something? Are they trying to rally the crowd? Are they trying to prepare the crowd for like a big announcement or something? So ask yourself, what are they doing? And that can help. You don't need a bunch of fancy names for rhetorical choices. What is the best way to not summarize and to write solid commentary for rhetorical and argumentative? Rhetorical connect to the rhetorical situation. So ask yourself why this choice for this audience on this occasion. If you need help with this, go to my YouTube channel, which this is a YouTube question, so you're already there. Look at my pretty recent video called Rhetorical Analysis Sentence Frames. That should be something in the title. That can help you with your commentary. I would also encourage you to look up the video. It's like my best tip for rhetorical analysis. That's going to help your commentary. In fact, since you're on YouTube, let me see if I can find those links for you. Just because I'm happy to answer questions here for sure. But sometimes it's easier if you watch the videos because like that's the purpose of the video, if that makes sense. Let's see. So anyway, I will get you those links real quick if I can find them. Let's see. What order do you recommend taking for the timed writes? Play to your strengths. Most people start with synthesis first. Here, I'm just going to move my phone with TikTok just so I can do this. Most people do synthesis first because it's like the most time consuming. So I support that. I don't think everybody should. I have a couple students this year who told me today that they're going to start with something else. And I was like, okay, cool. Because they're like, yeah, we're better at this order. So we're doing it this way. But I would say prioritize the essays that you do best. So if you are terrible at rhetorical analysis, do it last. If you really don't like argument, do that one last. Q2 is usually the one that has the lowest average overall, but there's no one answer that's going to fit everybody. Cause like if I took the test, I would do it in order because I would want to get the synthesis done because it would stress me out. I am better at rhetorical analysis than argument. So I would do 1, 2, 3. I have students this year who are doing 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. And I think I have There were a couple of people that were doing like 3, 1, 2 or something. I don't know. So yeah, just do what works best for you. Prioritize what you do best. And if you're like, oh, I'm kind of equal at all of them, then come up with a plan, but maybe on that day, look at the prompts and see which one strikes you as being the one that you want to like to do. Because sometimes you might look at it and you might think like, oh, this prompt's going to be really, really hard. Okay, found the sentence frame video. And there's an ad from the Kardashians. Let's see. Okay, so if you're on YouTube, I'll put that in the chat. That's the rhetorical analysis sentence frames video I mentioned. And let me find the other one about that one from like earlier. It's like my best tip for rhetorical analysis. I think that one's pretty helpful as well. What's the best way to plan for your essays? So it kind of depends on which one we're talking about, but in general, you want to keep your planning kind of streamlined because you don't want it to take too long, but you do need a plan, in my opinion. Like it helps. So I usually have for synthesis, I have my students kind of annotate and then I have them figure out their thesis and then their main ideas. So like they don't write a full thesis, but they'll kind of bullet point it, like whatever they want to say, and they'll have their main ideas and then they write which sources they intend to include, because I think it's good to know which you need 3, right? So it's good to know which 3 sources you intend to include, because that way you're less likely to forget one. And then for rhetorical analysis, same kind of thing. Like you just kind of want to outline your main ideas. If you have any like ideas of commentary, that don't assume you're going to remember them under pressure, write yourself a quick note or something so you don't forget it. Because I had that happen when I was taking tests in grad school. I was taking a test and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a great idea. I'll include that in my essay. And then I got to that point in my essay and I could not remember my great idea. So the next time I had a test, I got an idea and I wrote it on my paper and I kind of circled it. And that way, when I got to that point, I was like, oh yeah, I have a note about it. So for those on YouTube, I'm about to put a link in the chat for the one that's my best tip about rhetorical analysis. Because some say to analyze message or argument. So all passages have a purpose, and then typically they either have a message or argument. So they're going to ask you one of the 3. Your prompt is going to either say achieve a purpose, convey a message, or develop an argument. So focus on whichever one they ask you about. However, all passages have a purpose. So if they ask you about message, you should still reference the purpose in your essay. If they ask you about purpose and you see a message, go ahead and bring that up as well. They're all kind of like cousins. Like they're all kind of related. Like they go together, in my opinion. I find it kind of messed up how much your teacher determines your score. Well, unfortunately, that's a critique of the American education system, but that's also why I do what I do. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not for everybody, but I know my tips work for my students and for several others. So that's why I do this, is because I want to help people. My teacher still hasn't taught us to write a synthesis. Oh, wow. Okay. Yes, I can give a brief explanation. I have some synthesis videos as well. We need to understand what synthesis is. And please, if you have not done synthesis yet, if you haven't already done so, look up recent sample essays. Because when I teach synthesis, I start it in 10th grade because I teach 10th, 11th, and 12th. Thank you, Cordelia. So what I realized is either a year or 2 ago, I realized this. I taught synthesis, like I went through all the steps. And then I was like, all right, so we read the sources together and then we planned our ideas. And I was like, all right, so we're going to write the essay. And my students are like, great, how do we do that? And I was like, oh, right, we didn't actually talk about that. So when I showed them a sample essay and I was like, okay, so remember how we talked about you had to incorporate sources and all that? When they saw it, it clicked and it was so much better. So there's something unique about synthesis that if you've never seen one, if you've never done a DBQ in history class, they're not totally similar, but they're kind of similar. If you've never seen one, please look at what they're supposed to look like. Read the good samples. Do not bother reading the crappy ones. But basically, synthesis is when you're given 6 to 8 sources. Lately, it's been 6, and you have to choose 3 of them minimum. Usually 3 to 4 is good. to support your argument. So you are not summarizing the sources. Please do not just give us a paragraph about this source says this and this one says this. That's not your job. Also, you're not doing a rhetorical analysis. We don't need to know how convincing the source is or anything like that. What you're doing is there's going to be two types of prompts. We haven't had a factors prompt in a while, but a factors prompt is like, what should we consider when? Okay. So what should we consider? Let's say you're going to say we should consider location and we're going to consider energy for our topic, whatever our mystery topic is. So for your paragraph about why we should consider location, you're going to find a couple sources that prove that, and you're going to have a claim. We should consider location because, and then you're going to give us some evidence, and then you're going to give us some commentary, and then you're going to give us some more evidence and some more commentary to prove your point. So you're using the sources. It's like a mini research paper to prove your point. The other type of essay that they do for synthesis is they might say something about, like, whatever your topic is, tell us or analyze the role, if any, of this topic, or analyze the value, if any, of this topic. And so for that, you're not really considering different factors. You're just saying, okay, here's the role of this topic, or here's the value of it. So you have a couple main ideas and you use your sources for that as well. Hold on. So I think I caught the end of a comment. For the argumentative prompts on advertisements, do you think arguing ads on digital whiteboards are outlandish? Okay. I don't like that prompt. It's like old. I don't give it to my students. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, I don't love that prompt. Do I think it's outlandish, or do I think that argument would be outlandish? No, I think it'd be fine. But I don't love that prompt, if I'm being honest, if it's the one I'm thinking of. What grade are you guys in? I assume most of y'all are juniors. But yes, please look up sample essays, Zoe, because it'll make so much more sense. But I do have a couple synthesis videos. There's one where I like go through how to outline. That might help. I have a whole synthesis playlist, so please check it out if you think it would be helpful. Okay, sorry. Let me answer a couple questions on YouTube. Let's see. I find it hard to come up with examples for the argumentative essay. Yes, you are not alone. A lot of people do. Play to your strengths. Your examples don't have to be super fancy. Just make sure that you're including specific evidence. So, a couple sentences explaining who it is. If you're writing about somebody who is famous, you still have to tell us who they are. Don't assume that we know. And then you're going to need some commentary. Aim for like approximately 3 to 4 sentences of commentary for argument essays. But play to your strengths. If you have taken a history class, you probably know a lot of historical figures, or at least a few. You have personal experience that you can write about. If you are interested in sports, go for that. I don't know if any of my current students are alive, but I have a couple students this year that have incorporated cheer and dance moms into multiple essays. Very well, I might add. So you don't have to write about anything super fancy. Just make sure that it's something you could write about well, because that's what they can write about well. Yeah, commentary is like the most important thing. Don't put a ton of evidence. Like, you need evidence, but please don't put these huge quotes in, and like don't oversaturate it with evidence. Like, the key is the commentary, because the commentary is your own analysis. So that's what we really want to see. Would using a piece of evidence from a TV show be viable? Yes. Your teacher said no. Okay, well, your teacher probably said no because some teachers think that it is not sophisticated or it's not fancy enough. Yes, you can use it. It's not, I'm going to say this, it's probably not your best option. However, this is what I think teachers sometimes forget. You are writing this essay that you have never seen the prompt before in 40 minutes after you've been sitting there for a couple hours. And some of you are probably trying to get the best score possible for college. So you're under a lot of pressure. I would probably write about a TV show too. I mean, maybe not. I would try not to. But if you have no other idea, write about the TV show. Reality TV show might be better than like fiction, like, because we prefer real world examples. But write about what you think is going to be most convincing. That's just my best advice. Oh, you're welcome, Celine. Okay, let's see. What's different from synthesis and argumentative? So basically, a synthesis essay is an argument with sources. So synthesis has sources, argument doesn't. Um, let's see. Sorry, there's lots of people responding to each other in the chat, which is fine. It's just a little like, please keep responding to each other. It's just I'm trying to find the actual like questions. Let's see. What happens if you fail? I mean, technically nothing, because your grade for the class should be determined before you get your results, because you don't get your results until July. So basically, if you fail, you just don't get college credit. I always use Rosa Parks. Is that okay? Yes, as long as you're giving like specific details, because a lot of people use Rosa Parks and a lot of people tell us kind of general info about her. So if you're going to use people like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, George Washington, I would try to know some like more specifics about them, like if that makes sense. Because if you just say she refused to give up her bus seat, you're not really telling us anything that is super unique, if that makes sense. So go with what you know, but definitely try to like for me over the weekend, if I were an AP Lang student, I would try, if you have time, to come up with like 3 to 5 historical figures that you could research, 3 to 5 current events that you could research, maybe 3 to 5 historical events. And like I would watch a documentary or listen to a podcast or a TED talk just so that you have a little bit more knowledge. If you're studying for APUSH, which if you're studying for APUSH, I'm pretty sure is no, the exam's Friday. I was going to say if you're studying for APUSH, go to bed because your exam's tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, it's Friday. But if you're studying for APUSH, you're kind of studying for AP Lang as well. So that's a positive thing. All right, let's see if we can get some more likes on TikTok. If you are finding this valuable, go ahead and tap your screen a few times, please. I used evidence from the Capitol riot once, and my teacher said it was too current. Is that true? No, it's not too current. There's no such thing as like too current. Now it might have been slightly controversial, I suppose, but it's not too current. You can use current events. Studying for APUSH right now. There you go. So you're also studying for AP Lang. Tips for MCQ. I've talked about that. I know you're probably just joining and you probably didn't hear. I talked about that earlier, and I have a video on my channel that gives a bunch of tips. So I would love it if you would check that out. If you go to my YouTube channel, it is there. It has a bunch of MCQ tips. Can you explain how to get the 4 points for evidence and commentary? So basically, to get the full 4 points, you need to be super consistent. So you need specific evidence and developed commentary. So more commentary than evidence. Your commentary needs to be like very uniform. So you want essentially like equal amounts of commentary throughout your whole essay, I guess, if that makes sense. Basically, what I look for, like to keep it super simple, is let's say there's 2 body paragraphs. Are they both equally good? Like, do they get the job done? Do they have really good commentary? Are they equal? If the answer is yes, it's probably a 4. If one is better than the other, like one is getting the job done, the other's kind of so-so, it's close, but like maybe there wasn't enough commentary or something, then it would get a 3. My teacher showed a video in class today. Well, tell your teacher I said thank you. I really appreciate the support. If we get all the MCQ wrong, can we still get a 3? My teacher, oh no. First of all, you're not going to get all of them wrong. And there's things you can do between now and the exam. If Sadie, have you studied for the SAT or the ACT by any chance? Because if you have, you've probably studied some of the skills on the AP Lang MCQ as well. If you haven't done that, oh, it's so hard to do this via TikTok. I wish I could like just Zoom conference right now to help you explain some of this. There is still time to help you prepare though. Each multiple choice question is worth 1 point each. So you want to try to get there's 45. You want to try to get approximately 23 of the 45 right, give or take. But yes, if you've done SAT stuff, you've kind of done AP Lang practice a little bit. Can you explain line of reasoning? So line of reasoning is basically a logical progression of ideas. And so when we read for rhetorical analysis, the passage is going to have a line of reasoning. They're going to choose stuff that's good. So you don't need to compliment the writer and tell us how good the passage is. That's not the job. However, you want to follow their line of reasoning. So, how did they begin? How did they continue? And how did they conclude? Because if you follow their line of reasoning and you write an essay that's in chronological order, then your essay has a line of reasoning as well. And so line of reasonings get messed up if you don't have specific evidence. And if you don't have commentary that actually thoroughly explains your evidence, that's how your line of reasoning could get messed up, if that makes sense. Um, let's see. Okay, I saw something about like not teaching argument. Hold on. My teacher didn't teach argument because she said it doesn't matter since we've done it in y'all. Okay. The good news is if you've done synthesis, you've done some argument skills, and argument is super open-ended. So for some people, it's the easiest one, and for some people, it's the hardest one. If you haven't done argument essays yet, please go check out some released samples from the College Board. Look up AP Lang past exam prompts. Look up some Q3 stuff. And then read only the good essays. Read stuff that if it's a newer essay, it's 6-point rubric. Read the stuff that got a 4 out of 6. Maybe read the 3 out of 6 so you know what not to do. Don't waste your time reading the really low ones. Also, for what it's worth, many of you are saying, hey, we haven't been told this, we haven't learned it. And I'm so glad that you are here asking questions. And I will be going live tomorrow night. Don't totally know what time. After my kiddos go to bed. I'll also be trying to go live Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and definitely Monday. But it would really help, I think, both of us, you and me, if you follow on TikTok, if you're there, go through previous content, because I have a lot of previous videos, like a couple years worth. On YouTube, I've got 4 years worth of content. Not all the videos are amazing, but I really do try. I do not claim to be a professional video editor by any means. But a lot of the questions you're having, especially if you're like, I was never taught this skill, I have playlists for that, especially on YouTube. So please go watch those videos. Also, if you need more help, I do offer tutoring. The information for it on YouTube is in my description box, and on TikTok, it's in my profile. If you can't find it, reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. And for tutoring, just in case anyone's curious, because I'm not looking to make a ton of money off of people. I tutor on OutSchool. When you sign up for OutSchool, you get a credit, a certain dollar amount. That credit is the same amount as my classes. So you would get your first class at no cost. And when you sign up using my link, I get a class for my almost 5-year-old so that he could take a class too. He doesn't take AP Lang classes. He does like Spider-Man fitness where he runs around and pretends he's Spider-Man. He loves it. So anyway, that's a plug for tutoring. And if you happen to look at my tutoring stuff and you're like, oh, there's no times here that work for me, you can request a time and hopefully I can accommodate. So anyway, plug for that. Can you make up personal experience if it fits perfectly? Yes, because they won't know you've made it up. Don't tell them you're making it up, but they won't know. How often do you do tutoring? So I've got a couple group classes this Friday night to help you come up with a game plan if you're interested. I also have like 20-minute sessions, and those are a lot easier to schedule. So I have tutoring sessions pretty much every day. I had some for tomorrow that nobody signed up for. So if you're like, hey, tomorrow night I'm free, I've got some as early as tomorrow. Just reach out and let me know. My intro tends to repeat what it says. Is that okay? Yeah, just try not to repeat it word for word. A lot of people repeat some of that stuff. So like we kind of expect you to a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, if you are really worried about timing or you don't know how to develop an intro, you can just do a thesis. Should your introduction paragraph have at least 2 rhetorical choices, a message, and a purpose? So yes to the 2 rhetorical choices. And then I would say either message or purpose. You don't have to have both. Usually it's whichever one the prompt is asking for. By default, if you're not sure, just put the purpose because that's totally fine. But technically to get the thesis point, this is what frustrates a lot of AP Lang teachers is technically you just need choices. We like to see choices plus purpose or choices plus message. What's the difference between AP Lit and AP Lang? AP Lang is nonfiction. So honestly, I think it's more useful to most students in general because unless you're going to be an English major, the stuff you cover in AP Lit, while fun potentially, is not stuff that you use as much in college. So AP Lang is learning synthesis, which is research. argument, rhetorical analysis, so nonfiction, and AP Lit is like poetry, short fiction, and longer works like novels and plays. Good class, but I think Lang is a little bit more practical if you have the choice. Um, let's see. Think outside the box for personal anecdotes and still make sense. Yeah, like, do readers get bored of the same topics? Kind of. For synthesis, like, we literally see people quoting the same evidence all the time. It's fine. Rhetorical analysis, rhetorical analysis is my favorite one to write and to score. Um, Q3 is where it gets like the most interesting because people pull evidence from all kinds of stuff. It just came from TikTok. Awesome. Well, thank you. I've got like, I don't know that y'all care, but I've got like my laptop with YouTube and then my phone on top of it. So if I'm looking in a weird direction, it's because I'm looking at the other questions. Um, should we explain how the effect on the audience achieves the purpose? Yes, that is a good way to build some commentary for rhetorical analysis. Thank you for taking the time to help us. You're so welcome. How do I get more points for sophistication? Sophistication is hard. Really your focus should be evidence and commentary. But I do have a couple recent videos on my channel about sophistication. Do the graders really want kids to pass? Genuine question. Yes. We first of all, we only see a portion of it. Like we have zero clue how you did on your multiple choice. And we only score one essay of yours. So like at least 3 different people will grade your essays total. If we're unsure, we send it to our table leader. But yeah, we are told to read supportively. Like we are literally told this is not your classroom. Don't be penalizing kids just because you don't like XYZ. We are told to read supportively. So we look at it and we're like, okay, can we take them from this score to this score? Like it's kind of like a checklist. Like, did they do XYZ? Okay, good. But yeah, like they read supportively. And like I feel like if people sign up to be an AP reader, like they genuinely want to do it, for the most part. So like they're not like cranky people. They're wonderful people. They're fellow teachers, but like, yeah. It's a lot of reading for us, but yeah, people want to do it. Like they choose to be there. Is 2 body paragraphs enough? Yes, it is. Absolutely. You don't force a third paragraph if you don't need to. Is dual enrollment better than AP? It depends on your situation. There's like so many factors to that. The benefit to dual enrollment, because some schools have dual enrollment with AP. The benefit to dual enrollment is it might actually be easier in some cases, and it's kind of like guaranteed credit. But then there are some perks to AP, so it really depends on your school. Yeah, because not all colleges accept dual enrollment, especially if you're going out of state. That's when it gets really tricky. Do you need a counter argument? No. It's nice to have one sometimes, but no, it's not required. I was given an option for AP English Lit or an English class at a community college. Which one do you think is good? Coming from Lang. It kind of depends. Are you doing well in Lang? And also, do you like poetry and fiction and that kind of thing? Because I would almost say in most cases with the economy the way it is and with how the cost of college, I would almost say that the community college, as long as the college that you intend to go to will take that credit, I would almost say it's worth doing the community college because you would get the grade. It's probably cheaper, sort of guaranteed credit. So that would be something I would consider. But if you're like this fantastic AP student and you're like, I want the challenge, then go for AP Lit. A lot of my students, once they know they've passed Lang, they go to college English in our school, which I teach instead of AP Lit because they want an easier senior year. Because my college English class is nowhere near as hard as my AP class. And my AP class, I really don't even think is hard. Okay. Elise I don't know if that comment was meant to be like funny or rude. I don't catch the reference. But if it was meant to be rude, you can leave. And if it was meant to be funny, please explain the significance because it doesn't sound very kind. What do essays that tend to get the sophistication point do differently? So it really depends. It's like, I would say a lot of times, even though there's like 3 ways that they could earn it, a lot of times they do like more than one, but like maybe one's more obvious. So I tend to see it the most with like the broader context. Like if it's rhetorical analysis, they understand the historical significance, or they're really, really connecting the rhetorical choices to the rhetorical situation, just like deep analysis. If you are interested in like creative writing, or you have this like style and this voice that's like not so cookie cutter, you might do better with like vivid and descriptive style, like using colons and dashes and semicolons correctly and adding in adjectives and adverbs. Or if you're like a creative writer and you have a way with words, you can maybe have meaningful repetition or a meaningful comparison or something like that. So it kind of just depends, because I have a couple students who tend to earn the sophistication point pretty regularly. And like one student that I have in mind, the way she does it, for at least for argument, is we read this sample essay where they started with an anecdote, and she was like, "Oh, can I do that too?" And I was like, "Sure." She's done it 2 or 3 times, and I've given her the sophistication point pretty much every time, because she has this like vivid and descriptive anecdote that leads to her thesis. And so it reads quite nicely. Now, other kids in the class, they don't use that technique. Another student that I tend to give the sophistication point to, her essays are like usually 5 pages long, and they're like super thorough. And so it's just like I can't find anything wrong with it. So I'm like, sophistication. So there's different ways to do it. Yeah. So the MCQs are worth 45% of your composite. You probably want to be shooting for at least 60% of them correct, yes. But the MCQs are 45% of your composite, and the essays are 55%. What's the purpose of writing a rhetorical analysis? So rhetorical analysis is a skill where you're analyzing nonfiction, and technically you can use it in a lot of different ways in real life. So when you see a commercial, you have to like kind of interpret the message, and maybe not fall victim to some of the marketing ploys. I use rhetorical analysis a lot when I'm like, I guess, like having conversations, or even when I'm trying to like construct an email or something. Let's say like I need to make sure that I'm making the right rhetorical choices, and I have the right tone, and I have the right line of reasoning. So it does help. You don't necessarily have to write a lot of rhetorical analysis essays in college. You are more likely to do the research kind of synthesis stuff, but the skills do really help. Can you have a rebuttal and synthesis, or should we just stick to what they want? Only include the rebuttal should go with a counterclaim. So counterclaim and rebuttal, or concession and refutation. Only include that if you think it's going to help your argument. A lot of students include it because they think it's going to get them the sophistication point, and it usually doesn't. And so I would probably put it at the end. That way, if you need to cut it, it's fine, because you want to really at least have 2 good paragraphs proving your side. And just a lot of times people just don't have time for it. What scores do my students normally get? So the Arkansas State average last year, we were 50 percentage points above that. We were very close to 100% pass rate. Also, I teach in Arkansas, and the state average is really low. But we had multiple. I have a small class this year and last year. So last year, about 87% of my students passed, and we've had a lot of 5s and 4s. Not everybody. Like, I mean, some of my students, they try their hardest and they get a 2, but there are times where I have celebrated a 2 as much as I've celebrated a 5. But yeah, they tend to do pretty well, especially for our state. How long is each section? So multiple choice is 45 questions in 1 hour, and then FRQ is 3 essays in 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yes, thank you to those that are answering in the comments as well, because I know I'm missing questions. Coach Hall is a classroom name. Well, thank you. How important is the conclusion paragraph? Not very. Please don't waste your time on it if you feel like you need to move on to your next essay, especially if it's just going to like sum up what you've already said. Like in a real essay where you're not being timed for 40 minutes, yes, you should write a conclusion, but the conclusion usually doesn't impact your score. Sometimes I've seen it maybe if the whole essay was good and there was like this really thought provoking ending, yeah, it maybe helped towards sophistication, but most of the time we see these really simplistic or like conclusions where it's like, and these are the reasons why, and it's like you don't even need that, just you could just end it at a body paragraph. Let's see, did I catch everything on YouTube? Do the passages in MCQ go by difficulty? No, they don't. So, like, if the first passage is super hard, do not freak out. First of all, I have this theory that I can't totally prove, but I've talked to a few other teachers and they've kind of suspected the same thing. And I don't think it's always, but sometimes when the passage is hard, the questions are easy. And when the passage is easy, the questions are weirdly hard. And I don't think it's always like this, but please don't give up, especially if they put the first passage like as a hard one. My students just did a practice test from AP Classroom and we looked at their results and like the first passage, they were all like, yep, this passage was harder than the rest. But like, don't let that deter you because they did really well on the other passages and their scores were just fine. So if you happen to find the first passage really difficult or the first essay really difficult, whatever it is, whichever section we're talking about, don't give up. Like keep going because it's not going to, it's not like it's easiest to hardest. It's not like it's gonna get progressively harder. It's random. So don't let the hard passage, if it's hard, don't let it throw you. What would significantly improve a score even if it's subtle? Great question. More commentary will usually help everybody. To do that, add words like because, since, in order to. You can also use verbs like underscores, which means emphasizes, highlights, illustrates. That can all help. I would also incorporate transition words and phrases in a meaningful way. I have some topic sentences on a couple YouTube videos that might help as well to create that line of reasoning. But good transition words, it's really subtle, but it does help. So some good words to know. You probably already know like therefore or thus, furthermore, moreover means furthermore. One that can be helpful is consequently, because you can actually kind of use that in all the essays. So if you're trying to show cause and effect, that can be really helpful in your commentary. So consequently works. Let's see. What's the best way to introduce the choices the author uses? So I have some sentence frames that might help. Basically, it boils down to if you're analyzing it chronologically, you can say something to the effect of the author begins by whatever the choice is in order to. So we want to think of the what and why. So they begin by doing this because, or in order to. They continue by doing this, or they shift from this to this because. They conclude by doing this because. And so you can have it be like an ing verb, like by repeating this or by comparing this, and that would work. Let's see. Passing score is dependent on everyone who takes the exam. I've heard that's actually like not entirely true. I've heard so many different things about the scoring and stuff. They have told us that it's not like only this many kids can get a 5 and this many kids can get a 4. So like they've told us that like in theory, like if everybody wrote quality essays that qualified, everybody would pass. Um, we wrote about the pink flamingos. Yeah, that's a really popular prompt. I actually don't have my students do that one, but like pink flamingos are kind of like um the like mascot for AP Lang. Yeah, I mean, I've heard different things too, like the College Board curves it, and I've heard that they don't, and I've heard so many things that like I just don't stress about it. Like if the test is hard for you, it's probably hard for everybody else. But also remember that there's different parts to it because like just because you do poorly on one section doesn't mean you've tanked your whole score, which I think is important too. But yeah, they do something statistically, and it's not called curving. I think it's called norming. I don't know. I'm not a math person, but they have this whole thing that they do with scores. How do we add commentary to synthesis essays? Really make sure that you're explaining the significance of your evidence. So really ask yourself, okay, why did I choose this fact or this statistic or this example? What is it showing? Try not to use the word shows. Try to use something more advanced, like even showcases, underscores, emphasizes, illustrates. But like, what is it telling us? Connect it to society. Like, what is this revealing about society? What are the short term or long term effects? Things like that. Like, why did you pick that quote? Like, what is it telling us? How does it prove your thesis? Hmm. Um, is using one rhetorical device per paragraph enough for full points on evidence? It could be, yeah. Yeah, because you need like one, so you need um like one main idea per paragraph essentially. So usually your main idea is your choice and you need at least two body paragraphs. Prompt predictions for argument. I don't know. I'm hoping it's something like they've been doing where it's kind of open-ended and philosophical, but I'm kind of waiting for them to do something similar to like the overrated prompt or something like totally out there. Like there's a couple on AP Classroom that they're not bad. They're not like the ones on the exam, but they're like, um assert a position on whether schools should have a cell phone policy or something. So if they do something like that, I feel like it could be kind of fun to argue, but I'm worried that students would struggle with specific evidence. So I'm hoping it's more philosophical and open-ended, but they've already done timely decisions, disobedience, adversity, all that. So I was trying to think of like abstract concepts that they could do. And I thought about like maybe like fitting in, courage. I don't know. I was trying to think of like stuff they haven't touched upon, but I don't really have any actual predictions. The overrated prompt, it was from 2019. And basically, you had to pick one thing that was overrated and explain why. So, like, each of your body paragraphs were like reasons why the thing was overrated, and you had to prove it that way. If you haven't seen that one, you could literally type in AP Lang overrated prompt. Go look at the prompt and the samples because it was weirdly different than all the other Q3 prompts in recent years. Thank you so much, Marley. What do you do if you don't know a word in the argument prompt, like the artifice one? Look for context clues. Because in the artifice prompt, there's clues in the quote that kind of tell you what artifice is. I think the College Board, since then, it's kind of been a slow process because they write these tests years in advance. I think they could still edit them, but like they have a committee that writes multiple tests at a time, multiple years in advance. I think they're doing a better job of defining words that could be potentially problematic. Now, are they perfect at this? No. But look for context clues in the prompt, or in the case of the artifice one, artifice and artificial kind of sound alike. So that might help you. So figure out the word. You're welcome. Good luck to everybody on the AP exams. What if you misinterpret the prompt? You can still get some points even if you misinterpret it. Because if you like just do the best you can. Like go all in, and if you somehow accidentally misinterpret it, you can still score some points in most cases. Because they try to reward you for what you do well. So even if you misread, there's stuff in the rubric about a misread, and you can still earn some points. I'm scared of running out of time. Any tips for FRQ or multiple choice? It's easier to give FRQ tips for running out of time or not doing that. So short intro, worst case scenario, just a thesis, 2 body paragraphs instead of 3 if you're pressed for time. Don't worry about the counter argument and don't write a conclusion because sometimes those don't really help. Yeah. So those are my best time saving tips. Um, is it okay to make up evidence? Yes, they won't know. A lot of people do. One of my students last year literally made up a story about her sister. I've known her since she was 7 because she's my coworker's daughter. She does not have a sister. I don't know what the story was. I need to ask her. But apparently her evidence for last year's Q3 was Hamilton and then something about her sister who does not exist. If you're gonna make it up, make sure it's believable. What do you recommend to remember for the synthesis essay? Um, Most important thing about synthesis is make sure you have 3 sources. Try not to say like according to source A. Try to actually use the source's original credentials. So let's say source A is a chart from the Pew Research Center because they use Pew Research a lot. You could say something like, according to a 2017 study from the Pew Research Center, or according to a chart from the Pew Research Center. And then you finish your sentence. And then at the end of it, in parentheses, you're going to put source A, and the period goes outside the parentheses. That's going to sound a whole lot better than saying according to source A. But please have 3 sources. When we get to 15 minutes, do we read every passage or just the passage the time is for? That's a great question. So you're going to get 15 minutes and you can do whatever you want in that 15 minutes. You can even start writing an essay. So they're going to give you a recommended reading period of 15 minutes. I tell most of my students, especially if you're starting with synthesis, try to spend about 10 minutes on synthesis and then write synthesis and kind of like bank the 5 minutes of the 15. The reason why is because most of my students like 45 minutes for rhetorical analysis, not 40. So they do like 10 minutes for synthesis, they write for 40, then they read and plan for rhetorical analysis and they write that one, and that takes about 45, and then they have 40 left for argument. Or if they need even longer, then they have less for argument. So write the essays in the order that's going to be best for you, but you can start writing during the reading period. So, and remember, like, I would not read all 3 prompts necessarily. I mean, I would maybe glance at them to see what your topics are, but like, I wouldn't necessarily like read all of it and then start writing the essays. Like, take them one at a time. You might want to get the lay of the land, so to speak, and figure out, oh, okay, this is what I'm working with. But I would read like, okay, synthesis is about STEM. The rhetorical analysis looks like it's a prompt from a judge. Okay, it's a speech, and then like, oh, Q3 is something about timely decisions. Okay, now I know what I'm doing. But I wouldn't go through and read everything. Take it like essay by essay. Easiest way to get the sophistication point is usually by situating the issue in a broader context. For rhetorical analysis, the second easiest way is analyzing complexity and tension. The way we see it the least is the vivid and descriptive style. Yes, it's usually better to use 2 sources per paragraph. I think we got some shout outs going on to teachers in the chat. So awesome. Okay, so let's see. So a shout out to Ms. Estrada, Ms. Thurtle, and Ms. Daniel. Hopefully I said that right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. It sounds like you have some amazing teachers though. How do I improve my critical reading skills and understanding the purpose? It's really hard to do that in like quick and easy steps if I'm being honest. You're so welcome. I would say the thing is, like, if you're taking practice tests, like, definitely look at the correct answers, and if there's answer explanations, and kind of like work backwards and stuff. It's really hard. Y'all are so welcome on YouTube. Thank you for watching. But seriously, tomorrow, tell your teachers that I said hello. Commentary advice. And one of my students is in the chat. Commentary advice. I would say the best thing you can do if you're struggling with commentary is use words like because, since, and in order to, because that's going to help you get to the why. And then I would say use verbs like highlights, illustrates, underscores, emphasizes, things like that. Like, really make sure that you are actually explaining the significance of your evidence. So for rhetorical analysis, if you're analyzing a particular choice, look at the words in the quote that you chose and figure out, why did they use those specific words? So like, if they're going to compare somebody to a river, okay, why are they comparing somebody to a river? What's significant about the word river? Why is that comparison meaningful to the situation? So really think about why they're making that choice for that audience on that occasion. And then for synthesis and argument, it's a little bit different, but you really want to be thinking about why this matters and how it impacts society or things like that. Like, what's the message here? Do you think the easiest way to get 5 points is synthesis? I think that really depends on, like, your individual strengths. I feel like synthesis typically has the highest average, but I also sort of wonder if it's because, it's, like, the essay that people do first. So, like, if that's why, or if it's just the easiest one. I guess in some sense, maybe it is the easiest one. So in that sense, yes, um, maybe that's why. Or maybe that would be like the easiest to get 5 points in. But if you happen to be like super strong at rhetorical analysis and you think you could do it on that one, then go for it in that one. Should I read the short passages and do the answers, then do the 2 long passages in MCQ? Um, if you are better at those short passages, then start there, yes. Just my personal opinion. Just if you're doing it on a bubble sheet, please, like, actually make sure you're answering the correct row, because otherwise that'll throw off your bubble sheet. Whereas you're less likely to do that if you start at question 1. But if you're like, I am way more accurate with these writing MCQ, then start there, because you don't want to rush the stuff that you're good at. You want to earn as many points as possible. I would maybe try to practice that like over the weekend if you have like a test on AP Classroom that your teacher could give you or something, if that's at all possible. But yes, let's see. Is there any way I can find practice tests? So there are some, if your teacher will assign them on AP Classroom, that would be the best bet. There's also 17 questions on something called the AP Lang course exam description. It is this huge PDF for teachers. The MCQs are on page 122, I believe. They're not really full passages. It's only like 17 questions, but it could help. And they're kind of easy questions, I think, too. And then there's like some free online practice tests from test prep companies, not the College Board. Those are kind of accurate. I like the one from Marco Learning. I've used that with some of my tutoring students. I think the best stuff is from the College Board, though. You could also use SAT tests. It's not going to be the exact like question types, but it's going to be really similar. And they only have 4 answer choices and not 5. So it's not a perfect practice, but it's pretty close. How is a 60% average on MCQ and 5s on my essays? Good. That should be, okay, hold on. It's either a low 5 or possibly a high 4, I think. Oh, that reminds me. A teacher emailed me today about that and something similar, and I need to email them back. Sorry, I'm going to forget this if I do not write it down. But there's a way you can calculate your scores. So like each MCQ is worth 1 point. And then you can take your essays, like all 3 essays, whatever you got, like a 5, a 4, a 4, you add that up and you multiply it by 3.0566. And then you add that to your multiple choice. And then I have my Post-it here. This is close. This is not exact. But if you get 0 to 35 points, it's a 1. Sorry if it's backwards. 36 to 51 points is approximately a 2, 52 to 62 points is approximately a 3, and 63 to 72 is a 4, and 73 to 100 is a 5. These might be off by like 1 or 2 because sometimes it goes in, like sometimes the cutoff is a 52, sometimes it's a 53 or whatever. Albert IO also has an online score calculator that's pretty accurate as well. If I get 70% and 2 5s and a 4, what would I get? I cannot do that math off the top of my head. I'm assuming it's close to a 5. 7. Okay. What is, y'all? I cannot do math. My students will tell you this. 70% of 45, 31.5. Okay. So let's say you got 32 questions correct, right? And so then what'd you say? 2 5. So that's 10 points and a 4. So 14 times 3.0566. That's going to be 43. Okay, so 43 plus 32. Yeah, you would probably get, it would be right at the cutoff of like a 5. It'd probably be a very low 5. Worst case scenario, a very, very high 4. Y'all, that was too much math for 11:23 p.m. at night for me. Can you show the sticky note again? I can. Yes. I don't know if you all can see it clearly. I think I have a video pinned on TikTok. That has this info. And please know that this is not exact. It's ballpark. It could change a point or 2 in either direction. Okay. Hopefully that helps. They would round up. If you're at a 72.89, they round up. So it'd be a 73. Okay. I think I've answered almost all the questions. I'm getting a little bit tired. Can you send the link on YouTube as well? Link for yes, link for what? Link Tommy, just let me know what link and I can put that there for y'all. How to get better at MCQs? Kind of depends. It's easier. I think it's easier to get better at the writing MCQ because I think they're a little bit more straightforward. So I would start there. Do you know anything about AP literature? Yes. What do you want to know? As far as what it's about, it is their test is MCQ. So there's going to be on AP Lit. So if you're AP Lang, like this is not your test. They have some poetry and like reading fiction MCQ, and then their AP Lit stuff is a poetry essay, a short fiction essay, and then an open-ended one about a novel or a play or something. It's very similar to Lang in terms of how things are scored, but it's like the total opposite in terms of content. Do they look that up? Do they look what up? They don't fact check you if that's what you're asking. How many passages are on the MCQ portion and how many per each passage? So there's going to be 2 reading passages, which usually have between 10 and 13 questions. And then there's going to be 3 writing passages, which have between 5 and 8 questions. The grading distribution. Oh, the Albert IO one. Yes. Let me see if I can find it. Albert IO AP Lang scoring. Let me see. I'm going to move TikTok over. So what they do on Albert IO, and I think Marco Learning has one as well, is they basically they take the info from the previous year's exam and they kind of use that, if that makes sense. So it's Albert IO, and Marco Learning has one as well. Let's use the numbers that somebody said. So, oh, they go by rating. So they literally break it up by each. So that person said that a 5, and a 4, and they had like 31. So we'll do it this way. And this one doesn't make much sense, but we'll do it this way. Let's see if it says it's either yeah, it says predicted composite is a 5. So yeah, my formula is very similar to theirs. Let's see. Thank you for the likes over on TikTok. I really appreciate that. Is Lit harder than Lang? In my opinion, slightly yes, but I also really like Lang, so that might be why I think that. Most of my students have said that Lang prepared them for Lit. Like it's not the same stuff, but it's close. So if you did well in Lang and you like fiction and you don't mind poetry and stuff like that, you should be fine, I think. A lot of my students said that like Lang was very concrete and Lit is very abstract. So they liked going from Lang to Lit because Lang is like kind of like you learning all the skills, and then Lit is like extending it, if that makes sense. You don't have to have taken Lang to get into Lit, but they're just very different. So talk to people in your school that take it now and see what they say. Synthesis and rhetorical essays, the difference. Synthesis is kind of like a mini research paper with sources, and then rhetorical analysis is when you analyze a nonfiction passage, like a speech or a letter, and you're looking for rhetorical choices and the purpose. For argument, should you acknowledge the other side in your thesis, or should that just be in your intro? You can have a counter argument thesis. A lot of people do, and it usually works pretty well. How do you ensure getting all the evidence points? So for evidence and commentary, you got to start with specific evidence. And then to get a 4, your commentary just double check the rubric. Cause I know it's not the best wording, but really it's all about like uniformity, like develop your ideas uniformly, meaning like be super consistent, be thorough and consistent. Okay, y'all, it is almost midnight in my time zone and I'm getting tired, and I have a big meeting tomorrow. Not anything like super fancy, but just a big meeting at school. So I think I'm going to like close this out. But before I go, a couple things. Please make sure you're following if you aren't already, because I will be going live tomorrow night at some point, probably around like at least 9 p.m. Eastern after my kids go to bed because I'm on Central Time. So please make sure you're following so that you can get notified of future lives either on YouTube or TikTok. Please tell your friends if you think it would benefit them. And also, if you're looking for answers, please go to my old content on TikTok or YouTube. It really does support my channel if you do that. And so I genuinely appreciate that. And sometimes those longer form content options are better. Also, if you're interested in tutoring, the info to that is in my profile as well. I've got a couple group classes or one-on-one options that are very, very affordable this weekend if you're interested. Manifesting a 5 for the AP Lang exam. I sure hope you all get really great scores. Y'all deserve it. You work hard. So thank you all so much. And I hope to see you in an upcoming live. Bye, everybody. Have a good night. Bye, TikTok.